In part 1, Sugimoto and Asirpa teamed up to find a hoard of Ainu gold by collecting tattoo patterns worn by escaped convicts that are meant to point to the gold's location. Upon finding out that the man that devised the puzzle was Asirpa's thought-to-be dead father, the pair headed for Abashiri prison. However, upon breaking in to meet with the man,
Asirpa already lost her father once. She already mourned him and grew to accept it. Now she has to mourn him again, as well as face the reality of what he did to the Ainu. After the battle at Abashiri prison, Asirpa, Shiraishi, Kiraranke, and Ogata ran to Karafuto, the landmass north of Hokkaido. Kiraranke realized that Inkarma had been feeding Tsurumi information about their movements, and seeing how Hijikata tried to separate Asirpa from Sugimoto, they ran from him too. But why go to Karafuto? Karafuto today goes by the name Sakhalin, and throughout history it's been stuck in a constant tug of war between Russia and Japan. In 1855, under the Treaty of Shimoda, Japan and Russia agreed that both of their people could inhabit the land, as well as splitting the Kuril Islands between them. This understandably led to some confusion from Japanese and Russian settlers over who owned what. So Japan sent a representative, Enomoto Takayaki, to work out the Treaty of St. Petersburg in 1875, wherein Japan gave up their share of Sakhalin in exchange for the remainder of the Kuril Islands. However, during the Russo-Japanese War, Japan once again occupied Sakhalin, and after the war ended, the landmass was split at the 50th parallel, giving Japan the southern 2/5 and Russia the northern 3/5. While mommy Russia and daddy Japan were fighting over who gets to keep the house, there was a poor, innocent indigenous child stuck in the middle. The Ainu lived in Hokkaido, the Kuril Islands, and Karafuto. Vilk was a Karafuto Ainu, and now that Asirpa is the only hope they have of solving the gold puzzle, Kiraranke brought her here to introduce her to her father's people in the hopes that it might help her find a clue to the mystery. Their belief now is that simply having the tattoos isn't enough to reveal the gold's location, since Vilk wouldn't risk the gold falling into the wrong hands. There must be some key that links them all together, and they believe it's something only Asirpa would know. In the midst of all of this, Asirpa is wrestling with having lost her father and Sugimoto back to back. She's saddened by the events that transpired at Abashiri, yet also in denial. She tells Shiraishi that she believes he's still alive, because he's Immortal Sugimoto. It's a nice thought, but Ogata saw their bodies. He insists that Sugimoto and Vilk are dead. One of their first stops is the village where Vilk grew up in southern Karafuto, but all they find is a fox breeding farm, which makes the unfortunate truth obvious. Vilk was a human-fox hybrid bred on this farm, the ultimate fursona, too powerful to be left alive. No, Kiraranke explained that between the Japanese and Russian settlers, the Ainu were forced to pick between being Japanese or Russian citizens, forcing many of them to leave their ancestral homes and move to Hokkaido. Once there, foreign diseases killed them. The remaining populations that stayed behind, like Vilk's village, eventually didn't have the population to sustain themselves, and so they disappeared. Kiraranke warns Asirpa that this will happen to the Hokkaido Ainu too, if they don't do something about it. Further north, the group meets indigenous people besides the Ainu. The Ulta and Nivka people also inhabited Karafuto, and their culture was unique from the Ainu. Nearing the border between Japan and Russia, the group spends some time with an Ulta family after Ogata accidentally shot one of their reindeer. Accidentally put in heavy quotation marks. The Ulta were a nomadic people whose lifestyle was virtually inseparable from the reindeer that inhabited Karafuto. They relied on the reindeer for food, clothing, and transportation, and moved around alongside the reindeer's migration. They kept herds of reindeer, which is how Ogata managed to shoot one that belonged to them. But again, we're putting accidentally in heavy quotations here. See, in order to push further north, the group needs to pass the 50th parallel north, where Japan bordered Russia. With Shiraishi being an escaped convict and Ogata an army defector, they have no way of getting passwords to pass through safely. But since the Ulta people are nomadic, they have the approval to pass back and forth as they please. So Kiraranke planned to create a scenario where they could ask the Ulta to help them cross the border by disguising themselves in Ulta outfits and riding on their reindeer-drawn sleds. It's a great plan! What could go wrong? The border guards wouldn't normally attack a group crossing the border unprovoked. Kiraranke is hiding something. Ogata realizes that they must have a sniper on their side as the shot came from far off. Once he identifies where they are, he retaliates, hitting one of them in the stomach. Remember what I said about Ogata when I first introduced him. For him, fighting is a battle of wits. He could have hit the Russian in the head and killed him, but by hitting him in the stomach, the rest of the border guard will be slowed down, taking care of him, giving the group the opportunity to move out of the open. They're not out of the woods yet, though. I mean, literally, they just moved from an open clearing into the trees. And Ogata moves out to take down the rival sniper while Kirodanke sets up traps for the other soldiers. They approach the wounded Russian, and seeing Kirodanke, he utters a name.
You burst.
The wanted poster has a young Kirodanke on it. It wasn't Ogata or Shiraishi they needed to worry about crossing the border. It was Kirodanke, a wanted man. During the late 19th century, the Russian Empire was having some trouble. Before 1861, the empire relied on a feudal system that split its people between serfs and lords and free people. Serfs made up about 38% of Russia's population. The serfs were not technically slaves, in the same way that O.J. Simpson was not technically a murderer. Their lords could buy and sell them at will and had complete control over their lives, making them free people in name alone. Feudalism was seen more and more as an outdated social structure on the international stage, and as a result, Russia was seen as being behind the times since many other developed nations had abolished slavery and feudalism by the 19th century. Jeez, Russia, feudalism is so last century. Wishing to modernize Russia economically and politically, Alexander I began to dismantle the systems that supported feudalism. Then he died. Nicholas I carried the torch by improving the laws surrounding serfs and their treatment, but he didn't abolish serfdom out of fear of a revolution from the aristocracy. Then he died. Alexander II finally put an end to it with the Emancipation Reform of 1861, which officially put an end to serfdom in Russia. The serfs were given the rights of full citizens. They could own land, marry without their lord's consent unless they're gay, and even start businesses. Isn't that wonderful? Happy cheers and shots of vodka were shared all around that day. Except Alexander kinda still didn't free them, really. The government was afraid of the economic instability of taking the serfs' lands from their lords, so part of the emancipation stipulated that the serfs could purchase their land from the landowners on a redemption tax, basically paying for it in installments. But the redemption tax was so high that the serfs couldn't afford to feed themselves and had to take jobs working the lands that their old lords retained just to survive. This meant that their place in the world didn't really change. They were still indebted to their old lords and forced to work for a pittance to get by. In addition, because they had to work their lords' lands to afford to feed themselves, they didn't have time to work their own lands. Yields went down, leading to a famine. They were freed, but arguably in a worse position. Well done, Alexander II, well done! You're a great improvement over the prequel. I'm not the only one that thought so either. There were some people that were so happy about the changes that they thought the emperor deserved a fireworks celebration to really thank him for all he'd done. They were known as the Narodnaya Volya, or the People's Will, and in 1881, they carried out a plan that would mark their names in the history books. They believed the only way to solve the problem was to topple the autocracy starting at the top. Using handmade bombs, 2 members of the People's Will assassinated Alexander II. In real life, the perpetrators were Nikolai Ryzhikov and Ignaty Grinievitsky, is I think how it's pronounced. Ignaty was killed by his own bomb, bit of an oopsie, while Nikolai was executed for his crimes. But Golden Kamuy isn't real life, and Noda likes to twist things around for this story. In this version of events, one of the bombers was Kirodanke, and the other was Vilk. Kirodanke's involvement in all of this was foreshadowed by the fact that he's an explosives expert. He's capable of making handmade grenades, and like we saw with Ogata and Sugimoto, that skill was established in his younger years during an important part of his backstory. In Russia, Kirodanke is known as Yulbars, and he and Vilk are still wanted to this day. Someone must have tipped off the border guards that they would be crossing sometime soon. I wonder who that could have been. Kirodanke and Vilk were involved with the Narodnaya Volya because they wanted to protect the rights and territories of indigenous people across Russia and Karafuto, and agreed with the group's mindset that violence was the only way to get their message across. Thorfinn wouldn't like these guys, tell you what. The effects of the assassination were negligible at best. The autocracy did not collapse, and one Tsar was just replaced with another. Alexander III completed the trilogy, and as opposed to his father, was less generous in his mindset.
Alexander II didn't do a great job for the serfs, but he did try. The third reversed a lot of important decisions he made and made life harder for certain oppressed groups of people. In other words, oopsies. And Kironake thinks he knows what's best for the Ainu. Come on now.
On Ogata's side, a complex game of chess ensues. The sniper, Vasily, recognizes from the single shot he fired that Ogata is a skilled sniper, and Ogata shares a mutual respect for Vasily's skills. And so their game begins. Whoever shoots first will expose their position to the other and ensure their own death. So, like Nihei once taught Tanigaki, they only have one shot, and they must fire it with absolute confidence. That's why Vasily doesn't shoot what appears to be Ogata's position. He waits and watches. He doesn't notice any movement or signs of breath. He reasons that it must be a trap set up to lure him in. He believes that an experienced sniper like Ogata wouldn't set himself up in such an obvious position. If Ogata throws scissors, Vasily will throw rock, but Ogata must see that coming, so Vasily will throw scissors instead, expecting Ogata to throw paper, trying to outsmart Vasily. That's kind of what we're dealing with here. Each sniper trying to see through the obvious actions that a regular soldier would take in favor of researching for the tricks that an experienced sniper would play. So Vasily watches, waits, quietly, patiently, all night until morning, when he notices the trail of hastily covered tracks leading from the obvious trap. The tracks lead straight to an Ulta sky burial coffin, a custom of their people. With absolute certainty, he shoots, plugging the box, and in doing so, gives away his position.
There's a few things I love about this battle. For starters, it just goes to show how goddamn clever and skilled Ogata is, as well as his determination as a sniper. Ogata respected Vasily's skills and knew that Vasily would think that position was too obvious, so he played him by doing exactly what an amateur would do. There's also a fair bit of foreshadowing at play here. When Ogata showed up to take down Tanigaki way back at the beginning, he ate snow to mask the fog of his breath and protect his position, and Ogata did the exact same thing here over the course of an entire night. Of course, if Ogata had been with Asirpa longer, he might have known that this wasn't the best idea. Way back in chapter 22, Sugimoto said he would eat snow for hydration, and she warned him that his body would use too much energy melting it and it would lower his body temperature. He would get sick if he did that.
Ogata may not have received love from his parents, but his half-brother Yusaku was a different story. Despite only being his half-brother and a higher-ranking officer, Yusaku didn't hesitate to drop the pre-sentences and refer to Ogata as Big Brother. He was always kind and friendly to Ogata and clearly wanted to get closer to him and get to know him better. Ogata only used this against him. Yusaku had an important role in the military. On the battlefield, he was a flag bearer that led the charge into the battle. He was a courageous leader that took his job seriously and served as an inspiration for the other men. There was a belief among the ranks of the military that bullets wouldn't hit the pure, and so Yusaku became a flag bearer because he was a virgin. The flag would never fall in his hands, nor would the soldiers near him get hit. Yet one day, Ogata brought his brother to a brothel and promised not to tell anyone if he lost his virginity. He dressed it up as some form of brotherly bonding, but Yusaku stuck to his principles and refused. Then on the battlefield, Ogata led his brother to a captured Russian soldier. Ogata accused Yusaku of remaining pure on the battlefield, having never killed anyone. He never drew his blade to fight. Ogata asked if he really intends to be the only one that stays pure in the war. Ogata asked his brother to kill the Russian and end this farce. Yusaku refused, saying that their father told him he must not kill as a means to inspire the men. He insisted that killing makes people feel guilty, and that guilt would serve as a distraction in his responsibilities. Ogata responded that no one feels that way. He presumed that they must just pretend to feel guilty. They're all like him in the end. Yusaku embraced him and shed tears hearing Ogata say that about himself. He didn't believe Ogata was that kind of person. He insisted that someone who kills without remorse has no right to exist. Ogata shot his brother in the back of the head the next day.
Ogata is a psychopath. Now hold on, before the armchair psychologists in the chat get upset, I did my research. I'm not a psychologist myself, so this isn't a diagnosis, it's just my belief. He's not a sociopath, he's a psychopath. He lacks emotions, only capable of replicating them when it benefits him. He's manipulative and narcissistic, believing everyone is secretly like him. He is incapable of forming close relationships with others, not true ones, anyway. One really subtle detail I've always loved is Ogata's eyes. Every other character in this series has some level of detail in their eyes. Asirpa and Vilk each have highly detailed eyes to reflect their matching genes. Lots of other characters have fairly simple eyes that are just black dots, but they often have light reflecting in their eyes, bringing them to life. Their pupils grow and shrink depending on how they're feeling. The shape of their eyes will change to match their emotions, but not Ogata.
Ogata's eyes never reflect light. His pupils don't grow or shrink. Their shape seldom changes. His eyes are like two deep black holes, analytically absorbing the world around him. They don't reflect his emotions because he doesn't have emotions. They simply look for anything they can use. Ogata can smile, he can pout, he can scream in surprise, but his eyes will not reflect those feelings. His eyes show the real Ogata, someone completely detached and unfeeling. After his battle, Ogata falls ill and begins to hallucinate his brother with a trail of blood running from his shaded face. Ogata is unnerved by this. His normally cold and rational self is suddenly distracted by these visions. The group takes Ogata to an Ulta home where their shamans give him medicine and perform rituals to promote healing. And as he sleeps, he dreams of his brother. That pure, innocent soul. That soul that reached out to him. That soul that loved him. And when he wakes up, he sees Asirpa. While Ogata slept, Shiraishi tried to get Asirpa to run away. He pointed out that Kidoranke brought her here to solve the Code of the Skins, but it's too dangerous to stay with him. The Russians are after him, and after finding out what he and Vilk did, Shiraishi believes he's only looking for the gold so he can continue their battle against the Russian autocracy, which is still in place to this day. He's scared of what will happen to them if they stay there, but Asirpa decides to stay. Overhearing them, Kidoranke steps in and explains himself. He says that Vilk and him were fighting for the freedom of indigenous people, including the Hokkaido Ainu. Asirpa decides she wants to know more about her father. She wants to know how he became Nopperabo, because to her, she's only known him as her caring father. She's never seen this side of him before, this identity he kept from her. She wants to know who her father really was, yet the closer she gets to the answer, the more Asirpa wonders if they should even find the gold. After seeing all the death it has caused, she wonders if it would be better for it to stay buried. In the morning, Kidoranke suggests that Shiraishi should head back to Hokkaido. He has no reason to stay here, and Kidoranke agrees that it will be dangerous. Everybody already has a copy of his tattoo, so it doesn't benefit them or anyone else to keep him around. He's completely useless. Asirpa thanks him for his help up until now, and they say goodbye to him as they head on their way. Shiraishi stops and thinks for a minute, and he really does consider turning around and leaving, but before he can, he remembers Sugimoto. I've made fun of Shiraishi a lot throughout this video. I've called him an idiot, I've called him useless, but I also mentioned that he serves a really important, if understated, role throughout the story. Shiraishi completed the idiot trio, even if he felt like a bit of a third wheel at times. He may not have been as close to Sugimoto or Asirpa as either of them were with each other, but he is still one of the few people that Asirpa can truly trust. He's a pervert and a drunk and greedy to a fault, but he's still there for Asirpa when she needs him. And he's not about to abandon her with two people that only see her as the key to the code. The group is nearing their final destination. Just north of the border sits Alexandrov-Sakhalinsky prison. Alexander II was assassinated by 2 bombs thrown by 2 people, but there was a 3rd bomber waiting in case the 2nd bomb failed. In real life, his name was Ivan Emelianov. In Golden Kamuy, her name is Sophia Goldenhand. Sophia was beautiful and strong. Kidoranke referred to her as the mastermind behind their plans, an excellent leader and an inspiration for all of the People's Will's members. Kidoranke tells Asirpa that there may be things Sophia knows that even he doesn't.
so he figures they should go break her out of prison so they can have a chat. Yeah, that's right, 2 prison breaks in this series for Asirpa's sake. 3 if you count the one that kicked off this whole thing. In fact, they're planning to not only bust out of Sofia, but every prisoner in there. They're starting to make busting prisons look easy. No wonder an idiot like Shiraishi managed to do it so many times.
Kirodanke shares a story about his past with Sofia. After assassinating Alexander II, the trio spent years on the run from authorities and came to Vladivostok, where they met a Japanese photographer named Koichi, who looked like the human personification of the nerd emoji. Koichi had lived in Russia since he was young, and now lived there with his wife, Fina, and their baby daughter. The trio asked Koichi to teach them Japanese so they could go to Karafuto and Hokkaido and unite the indigenous people there to join the revolutionary cause to save their cultures and lifestyles from being eliminated. Of course, they didn't tell Koichi any of this. They assumed fake names and identities. They spent time living with Koichi and his family while they learned the foreign language, but Koichi was a very intelligent man. He began to notice little things about them. He noticed how intelligent Vilk was. He noticed that Sofia was likely an aristocrat. He noticed that they were always on edge. He learned from them as well. Vilk was very knowledgeable about the local wildlife and expressed an admiration for wolves in particular. He admired their strength and beauty and their pack-oriented lifestyle that prioritized the strength of the group over the individual. Koichi asked them who they really were, but they never told him. Still, he caught on. Koichi asked Fina to go and stay with her relatives for some time. He decided it wasn't safe for her to be there. He asked the trio to leave and to not come back, but as he did, there was a knock on the door, and it was the Russian secret police. Surrounded on all sides, they had no choice but to fight. Vilk interrogated one of the men, but he was confused. He didn't know who Vilk was. They weren't there for the assassins, they were there for the dork. For years, Koichi lived in Russia as a spy for Japan. Luckily for the trio, Koichi's house was secretly armed to the teeth for just such an occasion, and they helped him fight his way out. Only it wasn't just police they shot. During the battle, a bullet struck Fina, who came back to check on her beloved husband after finding Vilk's wanted poster. The bullet hit both her and the baby. There was no way of knowing whose bullet it was, but Sofia felt the most guilt over what happened. Koichi told them that they had to leave before more police came, so they left him there, holding his wife and child. They headed north to cross the ice floes to Karafuto, but Sofia was shaken. She couldn't forgive herself for what happened to Fina and her child. She told Vilk she loved him, but decided to stay in Russia and fight there as a revolutionary. Vilk and Kirodanke pressed on Hokkaido, where they integrated and planned to fight back in their own way. Sofia was eventually caught and imprisoned. Oh, and there's one more thing I forgot to mention. Kirodanke doesn't know this himself, but dramatic irony and all that. As Fina lay dying in Koichi's arms, he told her the truth, that his name was not Koichi. She asked him who he really was.
Tsurumi Tokushiro.
He looks different without the mustache and the disfigurement, hey! I was watching Golden Kamuy with a friend once when she mentioned that she was really impressed by how well connected everything in the story is. How each piece of the puzzle weaves together to form one complete picture with character backstories overlapping, events being foreshadowed well in advance, and even the most minor things becoming important. This was before we reached the episode with this reveal, and I remember thinking, you haven't seen anything yet. This is one of those scenes that cements Golden Kamuy as one of the single greatest manga ever created. It's just brilliant, and in hindsight, it's rather obvious. It's mentioned many times throughout the story that Tsurumi worked as an intelligence officer before becoming first lieutenant, so of course this Japanese spy would be Tsurumi. Golden Kamuy is a pretty long story, if the length of my video about it is any indicator. It's more than 300 chapters long, but there are seldom times where it feels like something came out of nowhere. Instead, you can tell that Noda planned everything from the beginning. The purpose of the gold, Vilk's involvement with it, the key to the tattooed code, and where the gold is hidden. All these things were planned from the beginning, and I very much doubt they changed throughout the production of the manga. This is in contrast to a lot of other manga where you can kind of tell the mangaka was figuring things out as they went. That's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as it all works out well in the end, but to me, it seems that Noda knew what was going to happen in chapter 200 as he worked on Chapter 1. This scene may also give us a hint as to what Tsurumi's goals really are, because I don't think we really know at this point. Sure, he goes on about how the government mistreated the 7th Division and about how it's high time they got something back for all their efforts, yada yada. But we've also seen that he was responsible for at least some of that mistreatment just so he could push the 7th Division closer together. So what's he really after? Does he just want power? Does he just want to create a new nation with himself at the helm? Does he know Asirpa is Vilk's daughter? Does he know Noperebo was Vilk? There's just too much we don't know right now. I mean, when we really get down to it, who even is Tsurumi? We know so much about the other characters. We know about their pasts, foods they like, things they want. These characters have more outside of the hunt for the gold, but Tsurumi, on the other hand, every scene is dominated by the search for the gold or his plans to rebel against the central government. The most excitement we get from him is when he's inflicting harm or seeing a cat. This is the farthest back in his past we've seen, and he was already acting as an agent for the military. Did he even care about Fina and the child? Or were they just convenient cover-ups?
Asirpa's group eats whale soup and prepares their plans to break Sophia out of prison. And while she enjoys her food, Asirpa hears something important.
Hinna. Hinna.
This is really important to a point that I'm going to make way later, which is why I'm taking the time to point out this seemingly innocuous thing, so keep it in mind.
Kirodanke forewarned Sophia that they'd be breaking her out by sending her encoded letters, and in the morning, they carry out their plan. They use Kirodanke's explosive expertise and Shiraishi's escape knowledge to blow up the walls of the prison. I mean, I don't know if Shiraishi was really needed for this part, but I want to give the little idiot some credit. The prison erupts in chaos as all of the prisoners clamor to escape, until finally, Sophia emerges looking even hotter than Kirodanke remembers. Sophia is one of the few characters that seems to age like a normal person. I mean, Kirodanke would have to be a similar age, but there's not a wrinkle on the man. Same with Vilk. Must be something in those Ainu genes, eh? Sophia seems less than pleased to see Kirodanke after so many years. She smacks him and asks how he could do such a thing to Vilk. In Kirodanke's letter, he filled Sophia in on the last few years. Something in there must have upset her. Sophia quickly realizes who Asirpa is and is happy to finally meet her. Disguising themselves as Nivuko fishermen, Sophia tells Asirpa stories about Vilk as they cross the ice floes into Russia, where they'll meet up with other revolutionaries. Vilk taught Sophia about all of the indigenous people of the Far East, taught her about their gods, their customs, their language. He also taught her that they had to fight if they wanted to survive, or they risked losing all those things. Vilk wanted to establish an independent nation of indigenous tribes in Karafuto and Hokkaido, not dissimilar to what Hijikata and Tsurumi are trying to do, but for different reasons. Still, Vilk must have seen that Hijikata would at least protect the Ainu. The group spots a pack of wolves, and Sophia tells another story. She tells Asirpa that Vilk admired wolves. She remembers a time when they were running from the secret police with an injured companion. When it became clear that the man wouldn't make it, and that his groans of pain would give them away, Vilk killed him without a moment's hesitation. Sophia asks if Asirpa knows how Vilk got his name. In Ainu culture, children are given temporary names at birth and given their true names when they've grown up. They get names based on their personality or what they represent. That's how Asirpa got her name, because Vilk believed she would lead the Ainu into a new generation, so he named her New Year. When Vilk was a child, he came across an injured wolf. He watched it for a long time. He could tell the wolf was lonely without its pack, but when the pack came back for it, they killed it. There's no place in a wolf pack for the weak that drags them down. They can't survive otherwise. Vilk respected that practicality. He admired how they lived logically without unnecessary kindness to drag them down. He wanted to be like them, and so his father named him Vilk, Polish for wolf.
"またか。お前にそっくりで美しい女だったよ。
私の知らないことを全て教えてくれた。今から教えることを決して忘れるな。ウイルクという名前がどうやってついたのか、お前の母親に話したことがある。そしたら彼女は私にアイヌ語の名前をつけてくれた。ホロケウおしっこに。
Asirpa remembers something she was never supposed to forget. Something unbelievably important. In the Japanese language, there are 3 character systems: hiragana, katakana, and kanji. Hiragana and katakana are each phonetic systems. Hiragana is used for traditional Japanese words and grammar, while katakana tends to be used for words borrowed from other languages. Kanji is unique. It uses Chinese characters to represent groups of syllables. For example, the word sakana, meaning fish and spelled using 3 characters in hiragana, becomes a single kanji representing all 3 syllables. What can get confusing and hard to learn is that how kanji is read can change depending on the context. For example, this kanji, which means big by itself, can be read as o, tai, or dai, depending on the word. Additionally, several kanji can share the same basic reading. Vilk's tattooed code is made up of many intersecting and overlapping lines alongside kanji surrounded by circles in various locations. Many of the kanji on the tattoos can be read as one of the syllables in the name Horukeu Oshikoni, to catch up with wolves. Asirpa is ashamed with herself for forgetting something so important, but she realizes that her father told her that name right before he and Retar disappeared. Having been left alone by her wolves, Asirpa didn't want to think about it and pushed it out of her mind. The weather takes a turn as a blizzard whips up. While everyone works to build a small shelter and wait it out, Ogata asks Asirpa to help him find some wood for a fire. As soon as he gets her alone, he asks her if she remembered something that could help them solve the tattoo mystery. She doesn't answer. Ogata asks Asirpa to tell him. He claims that he just wants a bit of the gold, and that if she tells him, she can drop out of this whole hunt. She can go back to Huchi and go back to hunting and eating food in the woods. She can return to her life of peace and leave the fight for the Ainu to Sofia and Kiradanke. But Asirpa doesn't fall for this. She asks why Ogata separated her from Kiradanke if that's what he thinks should happen. In response, Ogata mentions that he saw Kiradanke signaling someone when Sugimoto and Vilk were shot, suggesting that Kiradanke conspired to have them killed. Asirpa asks why Ogata didn't say anything until now, and Ogata says he needed Kiradanke to help Asirpa unlock the key to the code. Now that she knows, he says Kiradanke is dangerous. Ogata asks her again to tell him, but she hesitates. Sensing that she doesn't trust him, Ogata claims that when he went to check on Sugimoto, he wasn't dead just yet. Ogata claims Sugimoto begged him to finish his mission for him and give some gold to his best friend's wife for her eyes. Asirpa asks why he never told her that before, and Ogata asks if she really wanted to hear that Sugimoto's last wishes were for the woman he loved, playing on Asirpa's close relationship with him. Hearing this, Asirpa for the first time begins to accept that Sugimoto may really be gone. She asks if he said the woman's name. Ogata recalls that it was Tomei. Asirpa asks if there was anything else he said, and Ogata tells her that Sugimoto wanted to go home. Desperate to hear anything else, Asirpa asks if Sugimoto said he wanted to eat anything before he died. Ogata thinks back and remembers. Sugimoto said he wanted to eat anglerfish hot pot. Asirpa knows this is bullshit. She knows Ogata is lying to her now, because she knows that Sugimoto would want anglerfish hot pot, he would want dried persimmons. She points her arrow at Ogata and tells him to stay back. Ogata breathes a sigh of disappointment. He tried, but it's time to let the mask down. Frustrated by his failure, Ogata admits something that's been bothering him. He remembers when he first met Asirpa, how she stopped Sugimoto from killing him. Instead of being thankful for that, he's annoyed by it. He asks Asirpa if, surrounded by all this blood and violence and death over the skins, she really intends to be the only one to stay pure. Does she really intend to be the only one that doesn't have blood on her hands? He tells her to do it. loose her arrow and kill him. Descend into the muck with the rest of them and prove that no one can stay innocent. Prove that everyone is like him. To motivate her, Ogata tells Asirpa that he's the one that shot her father. Asirpa takes a moment. If he killed her father, then he also killed Sugimoto. Rage builds up inside her and she tenses her arm. But then she relaxes. She decides she won't kill Ogata. Ogata says that people like her shouldn't exist and points the barrel of his gun at her. Come on. You didn't really think he was dead, did ya?
Back in U-Body, there was this scene where everyone ate together, and Noda drew them all as a replication of the Last Supper. In this drawing, Asirpa sits in Jesus' seat, while Kiraranke sits in Judas's. Very subtle, I know. Kiraranke signaled Ogata once they got confirmation that Operabo was Vilk, and he shot both him and Sugimoto in the head. Luckily, Tanigaki managed to drag Sugimoto out of the way before Ogata could double tap the immortal bastard, because Tanigaki is just the absolute best.
After that, Kiraranke made for an escape with Asirpa and Shiraishi in tow, but Inkarma caught on to what he was doing and tried to stop them. Inkarma really was feeding info to Tsurumi, but only because she knew Kiraranke was dangerous. She really does have Asirpa's best interests at heart, but she was ultimately lied to by Tsurumi. There's a strong focus in this series on information. Who knows what? Who doesn't know what? What does knowing something do for someone? Inkarma was tricked by Tsurumi because he had access to information that no one else had and could easily lie about. Then there's Ogata, who abused every bit of information he had about Sugimoto to trick Asirpa. But it didn't work because Asirpa knew something that Ogata didn't. Something that seemed small and insignificant, but revealed his trickery. And as an aside, all of Ogata's answers to Asirpa's questions were interesting. Ogata said Sugimoto's love was named Tomei, but that's wrong. Her name is Ume. Tomei is Ogata's mother's name, and anglerfish hot pot is Ogata's favorite food. It's the dish his mother cooked over and over, and that his father supposedly liked. My personal theory is that Ogata told Asirpa the things he hoped his father would say as he died.
Noda does a brilliant job of keeping track of who has access to what information and finding ways to use that in a valuable way. Even the fact that the fake skins exist is valuable information. Tsurumi knows that everyone else knows, but it doesn't matter, because he can use that uncertainty against them. I know this seems like a really simple thing, but I bring it up because I feel like Golden Kamuy is special in how it handles the spider's web of information throughout the series. There are seldom instances where a character learns something off screen. If we don't see them learn something, then they don't know about it. And what pieces of information they know is really important to be aware of. And now I have a useful bit of information for you. Liking the video would make me really happy. Do with that what you will. Inkarma tried to warn Asirpa about Kiraranke because she saw him signaling someone. So Kiraranke threatened her and stabbed her. She asked him why he killed Vilk, and Kiraranke said that Vilk changed. He said that Vilk was supposed to tell their old comrades about the gold. Using that information that only Inkarma had, they were able to surmise that Kiraranke was likely headed for Karafuto. And unfortunately for Ogata, Sugimoto has plot armor. I mean, he's immortal.
The bullet didn't kill him. And I like this for a couple reasons. I know I just made the plot armor a joke, but it doesn't really feel that way. You know, there are a lot of historical instances where people survived serious brain injuries, even bullets to the head, but even then, in a lot of other series, this would feel very plot armory just because of how unlikely it is. It works in Golden Kamuy because we already have an instance of a character surviving a blow to the brain. Tsurumi. With that context, it doesn't feel particularly unfair for Sugimoto to do it too. And speaking of Tsurumi, after all the bloodshed at Awashiri, Inkarma, Tanigaki, Sugimoto, and Ienaga were captured by Tsurumi. Hijikata and his people disappeared. Sugimoto ended up handing over all his tattooed skins to Tsurumi, and since Asirpa will only trust him, Sugimoto headed to Karafuto. He didn't go alone, of course. Tanigaki joined as he still wants to bring Asirpa back to Huchi. Chikapasi and Nihei's hunting dog snuck along too, and finally, they're also joined by Koito and Tsukishima to keep an eye on them for Tsurumi. Just Look at this handsome group of boys. This is another thing I like a lot about Golden Kamuy, the constant mixing and matching of allies, enemies, and factions. At one time, it was the idiot trio against Hijikata and Tsurumi's groups. Ogata defected, then joined Hijikata. The idiot trio joined up with Hijikata, then after the breakout, everything got all mixed up. Kirodanke's group headed for Karafuto, Hijikata's group splintered and disappeared, while Sugimoto and Tanigaki joined Tsurumi and followed Kirodanke. Sugimoto doesn't exactly trust Tsurumi, but it's interesting to see the way these groups will work together when their goals overlap. It goes to show how no one is truly evil in this series, they all just have different goals. Well, Usami is kind of evil, but we aren't really going to get much of a chance to talk about him. Even Ogata, as bad as he is, I don't think he's an evil person, just a very broken one, but we'll get into that later.
After arriving in Karafuto, Sugimoto's group went asking around about Asirpa. There's a really funny bit with Sugimoto accidentally and continuously showing people lewd pictures of Tanigaki instead of Asirpa, and I really wish I could get poster-sized printouts of all of them. They managed to get a lead on her thanks to Tsukishima, who can speak Russian, and they ended up staying with an Ainu family that Asirpa also stayed with when she first came to Karafuto. The Karafuto Ainu have a different culture to those in Hokkaido, which you can see just by looking at their kotan, which is built differently than Asirpa's kotan. This explains why Vilk had to learn about Hokkaido Ainu from Inkarma when he first arrived. Karafuto Ainu had a summer home for warmer weather and a winter home built into the ground to trap in heat during the harsh winters. They ate unique foods too, like pickled lingonberries.
Start by preparing a brine for your fruit by mixing together vinegar, sugar, and salt. Then bring the mixture to a boil. Lingonberries aren't exactly common in the US, so I couldn't get my hands on fresh berries, but I managed to find some frozen ones at a small local store. Pack the berries into a jar, then pour in the brine and let it sit for a few days in the refrigerator. It's Saturday now. These guys have been in the refrigerator since Thursday. Oh, it's really literally stuck on there. Jeez. Oh. That's gonna stain. That's not gonna come out easily. That's all red. Still, I'm really looking forward to giving these suckers a try. Let's try to get a few of them here. It's nice. It's nice. There's a good amount of acidity because of the vinegar, obviously. The acidity of the vinegar pairs pretty well with the tartness of the lingonberries. It's kind of salty. That's nice. I like it. There was a couple of pickling recipes I saw that use like half vinegar, half water. I think I would do half vinegar and half water if I tried this again. They're kind of addictive, actually. I was gonna set them down and close the jar, but I think I need another bite.
The Ainu girl mentioned that Asirpa was excited to try their food, and Sugimoto knew they were on the right track. Karafuto Ainu also relied on dog sleds as transportation, and they enlisted the family's help to catch up with Kirodanke and Ogata. On the way, they did some shirtless boxing to get a tattooed skin. Because of his brain injury, Sugimoto wears a plate under his hat like Tsurumi to protect the damaged part, and while fighting it got hit too hard and he lost control, going on a mindless rampage. Sugimoto brain Gatorade. What if you mixed Tsurumi and Sugimoto's brain Gatorade together and... What? Don't look at me like that. Don't knock until you try it. That shit could give you superpowers. Anyway, Sugimoto regained his senses after getting dunked in a frozen lake, after which Tsukishima warned Sugimoto that he would kill him if it ever happened again. After all, Tsukishima is familiar with the consequences of losing control. Tsukishima grew up on Sato Island west of Honshu, where he loved a girl named Ikogusa. They were drawn together because the other children bullied them both. Ikogusa was bullied for her unusual curly hair. I don't know anything about that, by the way. And Tsukishima was bullied because his father was rumored to be a murderer. Tsukishima is a bit older than the other soldiers, so he fought in the Sino-Japanese War alongside Tsurumi. He promised Ikogusa that they could run away together after he came back from the war, but when he came back, all of the villagers were surprised he was alive. Someone had spread rumors that he died in combat, and Ikogusa went missing soon after. They only found her footwear washed up to shore. Tsukishima searched and searched, but never found her. And when he heard his own father spread the rumor about his death, he beat the man in uncontrollable rage until his father breathed his last breath. He never got to ask his father why he had done it. Tsukishima was put on death row, where Tsurumi came to visit him and hear his story as an old war comrade. Tsurumi did some investigating and found out that Igogusa was still alive. She had been married off by her parents while Tsukishima was at war, and they spread the rumor of her death so she wouldn't linger on the island waiting for him. Tsurumi brought back a lock of her iconic wavy hair as proof that she was still alive. Tsukishima killed his father for nothing. Luckily, he had Tsurumi in his corner. Tsurumi advocated for Tsukishima to be freed under the guise of becoming his Russian interpreter, because Tsurumi definitely can't speak Russian on his own. During the Russo-Japanese War, Tsukishima ran into a man that grew up on Sato Island that recognized him. He casually mentioned that soon after Tsukishima was arrested, they found Igogusa's remains, buried under his father's house. Enraged, Tsukishima confronted Tsurumi for lying to him. Why did he lie? Why give him hope? Why go so far for this? Why? Tsurumi told him that he did it because Tsukishima had given up. Tsurumi trusted him and knew he would need him. He didn't want Tsukishima to lose it all over one stupid mistake. The Russians attacked their position, and Tsukishima dove to protect Tsurumi, the man that lied to him, as a cannon blast blew off the front of his skull. In the medical tent, Tsurumi explained that he arranged to have the villagers discover Igogusa's fake body so that Tsukishima wouldn't be looked at so harshly for killing his father, increasing the odds that he'd be freed from prison. Igogusa really did marry and leave the island. The islanders just accepted the false story that she died, and Tsukishima happened to run into an islander there on the battlefield. Tsukishima seemed less than enthused about the truth. Tsurumi again reiterated that he needed Tsukishima, especially when they got back from the war, showing that Tsurumi had plans for the 7th Division before the war even ended.
Tsukishima decided that since Tsurumi saved his life from death row, he'd use his second chance to fight for him. He'd give his all for the man. Tsurumi expressed his appreciation as the Sato Island resident Tsukishima spoke to peeked into the tent. This backstory is brilliant. It's an excellent showcase of how manipulative, intelligent, and cunning Tsurumi is. The Sato Island soldier seems to be linked to Tsurumi, so did he speak to Tsukishima by chance? Or did Tsurumi plant him there? Is Igogusa dead or alive? Did she take her own life, or did Tsukishima's father kill her? It's hard to discern the truth because everything is buried under lies and misdirection. As far as I can tell, Igogusa really did take her own life, and Tsukishima's father did cause it with his lies. Tsurumi just took advantage of that to create an unbelievably loyal soldier. He lied to Tsukishima to give him hope, then falsely revealed his lie to destroy that hope completely. Once his hope was grinded down to nothing, Tsurumi could step in and become Tsukishima's new hope. And if that's the case, it worked. After the war, Tsukishima threw Igogusa's lock of hair away, giving up on it completely. In its place was an unshakable loyalty to Tsurumi. Tsukishima is Tsurumi's executioner, his boogeyman, his silent right-hand man. If Tsurumi says to jump, Tsukishima jumps and doesn't ask why. And I'm sure you can see why Tsukishima would warn Sugimoto about losing control and doing something you end up regretting.
But I have to criticize this, because this never comes back up. Sugimoto never loses control again, and Tsukishima never has to stop him. Feels a bit like a Chekhov's gun situation. This really should have come back up. You could say that Sugimoto only lost control due to his feelings of guilt and failure after endangering Asirpa and others in his life, and that it doesn't happen again because he works through those feelings, but that feels like a flimsy explanation to me. It also serves as a segue into Tsukishima's backstory, but that doesn't feel like a great reason either. This, to me, is the weakest part of Golden Kamuy's writing, which kind of goes to show how goddamn good it is, because that's really not that bad, but still, it would feel disingenuous for me not to criticize it.
Closing the distance to Asirpa, the crew unfortunately had to stop due to a nasty blizzard. The snow clouded their vision, and they ended up getting split up. Koito and Tsukishima pushed on to an out-of-service lighthouse, while Sugimoto, Tanigaki, and Chikapasi got stuck in the storm and did the best they could to shelter themselves from the cold. Tanigaki's Matsage experience came in handy as he was equipped with the skills to survive through adverse weather. To keep their energy up, Tanigaki shared some of his kane mochi, and Sugimoto remarks that it tasted familiar. Tanagaki's kanemochi has a unique flavor thanks to the added walnuts, so he doubted that Sugimoto knew it. But Sugimoto swore he did. Going back to what we talked about before about how deeply connected the entire story is, you'd be shocked by how many times Sugimoto pops up in other people's backstories. Tanagaki shared his kanemochi with a soldier wearing a white sash who pointed him in the direction of his sister's husband. That soldier was Sugimoto. Sugimoto also vacated a medical sled for Tsukishima, and he may have even met Yusaku at some point. He may have even pretended to be him in a wacky turn of events that I won't have time to cover. It's not super important to know that they've met before, as none of them remember it. It was brief and a few years ago, and in the middle of a war when they probably saw soldiers they didn't know fairly regularly. It just goes to show how they're all connected to some degree. Sugimoto may not remember the exact moment he had it, but he really has had Tanagaki's kanemochi before, and in a way, they're connected by that shared taste. And other shared experiences. Stuck out in the cold, Sugimoto's consciousness begins to fade. Tanagaki warns him not to fall asleep or he'd die. The blizzard brought back memories of the war, of sitting in trenches in Russia with death all around. Sugimoto remembered his fight to survive, the awful things he had to do to survive. He remembered the monster he was forced to become, and then he thought of Asirpa, as a bright light appeared off in the distance. With the lighthouse keeper's help, Koito and Tsukishima managed to create a beacon for Sugimoto and company to follow and escape the cold. Do you get it? Asirpa is his guiding light. Very subtle, I know. The group stayed with the lighthouse keeper and his wife, where they shelled pelmeni and borscht. Borscht is a beet soup made throughout Eastern Europe. It's a popular dish in Ukraine, Poland, and Russia, but we're going to be making a Russian variant since the crew is eating with a Russian family. Start by peeling and dicing the beet, then mince garlic and dice onion and sausage. Heat some oil in a pot and sear stew beef in the hot oil. Remove the beef, add in the sausage, and brown it up before adding the beef, garlic, onion, beets, canned diced tomatoes, and beef stock to the pot. Bring the soup to a boil and then let it simmer for 2 hours, covered. Once the 2 hours are almost up, dice potatoes, slice carrots, and dill. This recipe also calls for cabbage, but I goofed and bought iceberg lettuce by mistake, so we'll skip that one. Our soup should start to take on a nice red hue thanks to the beets as we add in the carrots and potatoes and leave it to simmer for another hour. Across all the recipes I looked at, I saw a pretty wide variety of ingredients, so feel free to pick and choose what you want to include in your soup. As far as I can tell, the only real constant is the beets themselves. While we wait, we'll work on the pelmeni, which are little meat and vegetable dumplings. Mix together flour, water, and eggs to form a nice dough. Prepare the filling by taking ground meat, I'm using pork, diced onions, salt, and pepper, and mixing them together. Prepare a floured surface and roll the dough out into a nice thin sheet. Normally you could use a circle cookie cutter to cut out the dough, but the one I ordered didn't get delivered in time to film, so I used the lid from a tub of G Fuel. It seemed to work pretty well. Place some of the filling we prepared in between 2 rounds of dough and press the edges together. Finally, we boil them until they float to the surface and they're good to go. At the end of our 3rd hour of simmering, add in the dill, red wine, vinegar, salt and pepper, and let simmer for a final 15 minutes before it's ready to serve. I may have simmered my soup a little too hot because the soup reduced a lot and my borscht ended up looking more like a beet stew than a beet soup, but hey, that's not too bad. Check the comments to find out if the Eastern Europeans are mad at me for the thickness of my soup. Lastly, we garnish the borscht with a dollop of sour cream and it's ready to taste.
Oh, hot. Oh, hot. So hot. Ugh. It's so hot, but also so fucking good. Wow, that's really good. Burned my tongue. Fuck. Never had beet before, but I must say I'm a fan. That's really quite good. I was worried about the size of the chunks of meat that were in there. I thought they might be a bit too big, but it doesn't even matter. They're falling right apart. My God, that is delicious. That is so freaking good. Let's take a try of these pelmeni. It's very oniony, but I think that's a little bit on me. I think I added probably too many onions, but it's really good. Ooh. Oh, they're both really nice. This is a good meal right here. Those Russians know what's up, brother. These are good. This is some good food.
The lighthouse couple were happy to have company to share their meal with, as their daughter disappeared with a man that stayed with them for some time. They didn't know where she was, and they missed her. Familiar with that awful feeling of uncertainty, of not knowing where someone you love is or if they're even alive, Sugishima took a picture of their daughter with him and promised to keep an eye out for her. Sugimoto also left them with a picture of himself in case Asirpa happened to stop by, and the team kept heading north. Finally, they stayed with the Ulta family that assisted Kiridanke's group. The family pointed them in the direction of Aleksandrovsk-Sakhalinsky, where they arrived at the prison. The breakout was already in progress. Using Nihei's hunting dog, they were able to follow Asirpa's scent out onto the ice floes when a blizzard started to pick up. From there, things got, shall we say, messy. Sugimoto ran ahead and found Shiraishi about to slip into the frozen waters, and after telling Shiraishi about Ogata and Kiridanke's betrayal, they headed to find Asirpa. Sugishima split off from the rest when he happened to run into the lighthouse couple's daughter, who had been imprisoned alongside Sophia. What a coincidence! She revealed that she willingly ran away because she was bored living out in the middle of nowhere, but Sugishima didn't accept this. He yelled at her that she should at least let them know she's alive. He couldn't stand the idea of leaving them without that knowledge. She admitted that she didn't want them to find out that she had been arrested. Tanigaki ran into Kiridanke and immediately attacked him for stabbing Inkarmat. Their fight was brutal, and Tanigaki was in danger of being defeated, until he stabbed Kiridanke with his own knife, the same one he left in Inkarmat's stomach. And finally, as you know, Ogata tried to get Asirpa to kill him, to bloody her hands like all of theirs were, to prove that no one gets to stay innocent, to prove that everyone is a guiltless monster like him. But she refused. She stuck to her principles and lowered her arrow. And Ogata had the nerve to point his gun at her, saying that people like her shouldn't be allowed to exist. Out of surprise, Asirpa's arrow slipped and hit Ogata. She's immediately overwhelmed with guilt, while Ogata seems eerily pleased with this result. Sugimoto, overwhelmed with rage, pins Ogata down, draws his knife, carves out his eye, and sucks the poison out. As angry as he is with Ogata, as much as he wants him dead, he won't let Asirpa be the one to kill him. He won't let Ogata drag her down with the rest of them. He won't let her become a murderer. The ice breaks and Asirpa starts to float away.
Asirpa-san! Ore no te o!
Sugimoto!
Finally reunited, the pair share a wholesome hug while Shiraishi looks on from the side. But they can't stick around. They need to go find Kiridanke and confront him. Only one problem, Asirpa's tears froze her eyelid to the button of Sugimoto's coat. Luckily, they've got Shiraishi. Showered in Shiraishi's piss, it seems like everything is right with the world once again. Truly, this was their golden Kamuy.
Why, hello there. Do you hate bad deals? Well, so do I. And that's why this video isn't sponsored. Sure, I could have taken a Displate sponsorship and tried to sell you shitty AI-generated wall plates. God knows they offered. But you and me, we're smarter than that. We know a good deal from a bad deal, and that's why I didn't even bother. I'd rather tell you about the Captain Mack Patreon. For the measly cost of a Lincoln face paper, you get early access to new videos, weekly progress updates, behind-the-scenes live streams, written reviews, and even the occasional exclusive video, such as extended cuts of the cooking segments from this very video. That's a good deal right there. For both of us. Because the Patreon is also the best way for you to support what I do. If you can't afford it, no problem. Liking the video also helps me out a lot. Thank you for listening, and let's get back to Golden Kamuy.
Koito and Sugishima find Tanigaki injured after his fight with Kiridanke and run to find him. Unfortunately, Kiridanke was prepared for pursuers. Sugishima protected Koito and got injured, yet shows no concern for himself, instead asking if Koito is alright. Sugishima is someone that has thrown his own life away in favor of supporting Tsurumi. Sugishima has no real goals or aspirations beyond bringing Tsurumi's vision to life. He views his own life as disposable if throwing it away would assist that goal. Koito is important to Tsurumi's plans, both because he's a surprisingly capable officer and because Koito's father is a high-ranking Navy officer. And while Koito is bratty, immature, and naive, I want to reiterate that he is an extremely strong character, as we're going to see. Koito won't abide those that hurt his subordinates, and he's out for blood for what Kirodanke did to Tsukishima. Koito catches up to Kirodanke and a fierce battle ensues. They grapple on the ground as Kirodanke forces his knife down into Koito's chest. With a fierce showing of his determination to get revenge, Koito pulls the knife out of Kirodanke's stomach and thrusts it into his throat. Kirodanke barely blocks it when Tanigaki and Tsukishima catch up and shoot him. Not prepared to go down without a fight, Kirodanke pulls the pin on one more explosive and tosses it at them. Yet Koito won't allow more harm to come to his men, and with a magnificent flourish, he cuts the grenade in half before it can cause any harm. Finally, Kirodanke is unable to continue fighting. After all his battles, his resistance, his fight, he is defeated. Asirpa catches up, and as Kirodanke bleeds out, she whispers in his ear that she remembered the key. With a look of satisfaction on his face, Kirodanke bids Asirpa to go with Sophia, for all of their sakes, then breathes his last breath. Kirodanke was a complicated man. He did terrible things to achieve his goals, including killing his lifelong friend because their goals diverged. But ultimately, he did it all for the sake of protecting indigenous people across the Far East. His means were unjust, but his goals were ultimately noble. And he died, fighting for that goal to the very end.
Asirpa admits that she wanted to ask Kirodanke more questions about why her father had to die. Asirpa knows that Sophia may have more answers for her, but they got split up in all this chaos. She decides not to go looking for Sophia because she knows Sophia will find her again. Instead, the group rushes off to get a doctor for Tsukishima and Ogata. In a moment of calm, Tsukishima tells the lighthouse keeper's daughter that he understands she doesn't want to go home, but that she should at least send her parents a letter explaining everything, and she agrees to do it. Finally, together again, Asirpa and Sugimoto talk about what to do next. Asirpa admits that she doesn't think Tsurumi will let her see Huchi and the Kotan. After meeting up with Sugimoto, they're now headed to meet up with him. Asirpa knows her freedom will be restricted until they solve the code, but Sugimoto thinks this is for the best. He believes Tsurumi just wants her for the code, while Hijikata wants her to lead a rebellion against the government, forcing her into a battle she might not want. Asirpa wonders if that's really what's best, considering her father wanted her to work with Hijikata, and asks if Vilk told Sugimoto anything before he died. Sugimoto explains that Vilk didn't kill the Ainu, but refrains from telling her how Vilk wanted her to lead. Sugimoto is sick of everyone trying to decide what Asirpa should do, and wants her to decide for herself. Sugimoto is determined to find the gold so Asirpa can finally be freed from all of this, supplanting his original goal to find the gold for Ume's surgery. It's not to say that he doesn't still want that, but I very much doubt it's his primary motivation anymore. They take Ogata to a doctor, but after his surgery, he disappears after knocking out the doctor. Sugimoto runs out to find him, while Koito stays to check on the doctor. Ogata survived.
Barchonok.
The word sounds all too familiar. Koito grew up in Kagoshima. The son of a high-ranking naval officer, he was well known and his father gave him just about anything he wanted. One day, while riding his fancy motorized tricycle imported from France, Koito ran into a pedestrian but didn't think to stop for a minute, instead chastising the pedestrian for getting in the way. I'm with Koito on this one. Normalize blaming pedestrians for getting hit by cars. Get out of the way. My car insurance premiums can't take too many more ankle biters getting isekai'd. The man didn't take this lying down. Instead, he ran Koito down and smacked some manners into him. Normalize hitting kids too while we're at it, or re-normalize it. This was Koito's first meeting with First Lieutenant Tsurumi. Koito was shocked because everyone had always been afraid to scold him knowing who his father was, but not Tsurumi. Tsurumi treated him as an equal. Koito showed Tsurumi to the local cemetery. Tsurumi had come to pay his respects to Saigo Takamori, the man that led the Satsuma samurai that fought with the emperor's forces against the shogun during the Boshin War. And after the Meiji Restoration, he was a key figure in dismantling the Han system, which sought to take power away from the regional daimyo and return it to the emperor, forming the centralized Meiji government. After disagreements with how to handle relations with Korea, Saigo left the government and eventually led the Satsuma Rebellion, which ended in his death. It's unclear why Tsurumi came to visit the man's grave so many years after his passing. After the ride out to the cemetery, Koito and Tsurumi sat down to share Sukisapu Anpan together. Anpan is a fairly common Japanese sweet. The name is a shortening of Anko Pan, meaning red bean paste bread. I couldn't figure out what makes Sukisapu Anpan different from regular Anpan, but from what I can tell, it may just be the disc shape that we see in Golden Kamuy, which I'm not really sure how they achieve. The Anpan I'm making will look more like a roll, but otherwise it should be the same as what Tsurumi and Koito are eating. Start by activating yeast and a mixture of warm water and sugar and heating whole milk to a low temperature in a pan. Mix bread flour, cake flour, salt, and sugar. Crack an egg and beat it before adding it to the dry ingredients along with the activated yeast and warm milk. Once you've got a nice dough, turn it out onto a lightly floured surface and knead until the dough becomes elastic and springy. Stretch the dough out, place room temperature unsalted butter on top, roll it up, and knead until the butter incorporates into the dough. It's going to become an oily, buttery mess from which it will feel like there's no return, but just keep kneading and the dough will eventually become smooth and stretchy once again. Form the dough into a ball and cover it with plastic wrap to let it rise until it doubles in size. Once it has, deflate it and fold it in on itself a few times before dividing it into 8 pieces. Form each piece into a ball, lay them out on a baking sheet, and cover them with plastic wrap to allow them to rise for just 15 minutes. After they have, take each one and lightly deflate it, stretch it out, place red bean paste into the center and wrap the dough around it, taking care to pinch in the dough at the bottom. Let the dough rise, covered for half an hour while the oven preheats. Prepare an egg wash by beating an egg with water, then brush it onto the dough once they're done rising. Bake for 20 minutes and pull them out when they're a nice golden brown color.
God, that is fucking good. I mean, it's basically just bread stuffed with red bean paste. That's hard to not be tasty, I feel like, but you can see it kind of in there. I stuffed the dough kind of thick at the bottom, so it kind of got pushed to the top, but it's all right. Like, the bread's good. I have no complaint about that. Oh. It's nice, because I think that here in the US, desserts tend to be like super duper sweet, like super duper sugary. I know that a lot of Japanese confections aren't as heavily on the sugar side, even though, you know, they are desserty. In Japan, they like a lot of like sweet and salty, or sweet and savory, or just sweet but not too sweet, and this is that, you know? Red bean paste is very sweet on its own, so with the addition of the bread, it's not too sweet, and it's just kind of pleasant and tasty. Oh, it's so good. Fuck me. That is really, really good. It's awfully nice of Tsurumi to offer that to Koito with no ulterior motives, am I right?
While at the cemetery, Koito took the time to pay respect to his late older brother, who was an officer in his father's naval fleet. He was on a ship during the First Sino-Japanese War when he was killed during combat. Koito's father is likely based on Ito Tsukiyuki, who was the admiral of the Imperial Navy during the Russo-Japanese War. Ito was also born in Satsuma, although I couldn't find any information about any children he may have had. Koito lamented that he wasn't as capable as his brother and believed he should have been the one to die instead. Tsurumi reassured Koito that he didn't need to take his brother's place. He needed to find his own strength. After their afternoon together, the pair parted, and Tsurumi expressed hope that they would one day meet again. Yeah, I bet you do want to meet him again, Tsurumi. Fucking weirdo. 2 years later, Koito found himself in Hakodate in southern Hokkaido. While riding his tricycle around town, he was kidnapped by a bunch of men with their faces covered. The men spoke only in Russian, suggesting that they were Russian agents planning to use Koito as a bargaining chip against his father. This was before the Russo-Japanese War, and Japan had several ships moored within the Tsugaru Strait, overseen by Koito's father. Their position would prevent any Russian fleets from being able to pass through and reach the Pacific Ocean. The man brought in to rescue Koito was none other than Tsurumi. His expertise as a former intelligence officer was indispensable for such a situation. Tsurumi deduced that the kidnappers' goal was likely to coerce Koito's father to destroy the ships. Koito's father, recognizing the importance of the ships to Japan, coldly decided that they could not give in to the kidnappers' demands. It would be better for Koito to die than for millions to die because they weren't prepared for a Russian attack. Normalize sacrificing your children for the good of the nation. On Koito's end, the kidnappers gave him food to eat, and he recognized the taste of Sukisapu Anpan, which happened to be stored in the building and had almost certainly gone bad. Enjoy the food poisoning, kid. Way to treat a hostage. The kidnappers called Koito's father with their demands, and as expected, they wanted the destruction of the ships. Tsurumi asked them to put Koito on the phone, and his father spoke to him directly. He told Koito that for the good of the country, he could not help him. Koito apologized to his father for not being more like his brother. Then the phone cut out amid the sounds of Koito fighting against his kidnappers. They managed to pin him down, and as one of them stood over him with a gun to his head, he uttered a single word.
Barchonok.
Suddenly, Koito's father busted down the door, scantily clad. Tsurumi managed to figure out where the kidnappers were keeping Koito. They brought him to Goryokaku, the star fortress where the Boshin War was brought to its end. With the location in hand, Koito's father rushed to his rescue with Tsurumi in tow. The pair lost a lot of clothes during their oddly homoerotic frantic dash, and Tsurumi charged in, illuminated like a god in Koito's eyes. They defeated Koito's attackers, and found them to be average Russian men, as expected. Tsurumi's men rushed in to take care of the bodies, and although foreign to Koito, their faces are rather familiar to us. Koito was in disbelief that it was Tsurumi, the man that first gave him Sugisapu Anpan, that came to his rescue. He felt they were connected by fate, but Tsurumi suggested that it may be the Anpan itself that brought them together. Koito's father told him that he was proud of him for being so brave, and with that renewed sense of worth, Koito enlisted in the military with plans to work under Tsurumi in the 7th Division. Back in the present, pinned down by Ogata with a gun to his head, that word, Barchonok, sticks out to Koito as Ogata squeezes the trigger. However, not wanting to give away his position with the sound of the gun, Ogata instead knocks Koito out and makes a run for it. As he flees by horse, Sugimoto tries to take him out. Yet Ogata simply sticks his arms out and laughs. Thankfully for him, Sugimoto is a notoriously poor shot. Sugimoto smiles to himself. He's glad Ogata survived, so that he can kill him when he returns. On their way back south to meet with Tsurumi, the group stops in a town south of the border where they're attacked by a sniper. They initially assume that it's Ogata, but to their surprise, they find Vaisili. Ogata didn't kill him during their sniper battle. The bullet destroyed Vaisili's jaw, rendering him unable to speak, and he's out to settle the score. He attacks the group, believing Ogata would be among them, but after realizing he's after Ogata, Sugimoto made peace with him over their mutual enemy. Vaisili is a really goofy character moving forward, despite his rather serious intro. Since his jaw was destroyed, Vaisili starts to communicate kind of like a toddler, with grunts and motions. He tags along quietly, following the group wherever they go in hopes of running into Ogata again, so they can finish their battle.
Sugimoto fills Vaisili in on everything that's happened since the Abashiri prison break. He tells him about how Asirpa shot Ogata, but explains that he knows she didn't mean to. He explains how he saved Ogata to make sure she wouldn't be responsible for his death. Sugimoto tells Vaisili that he sees something pure in Asirpa, something that reminds him of himself. When he was young, before his family's sickness and all the war and death turned him into the person he is today. He refers to that pureness as his salvation, as Asirpa listens in quietly. This moment explains a lot about Sugimoto's motivations. Sugimoto very clearly regrets the person he's become. The way he cried when Asirpa asked if he could return to his old self, and how he clearly views himself and everyone else that has killed as being cursed, illustrates this loathing for what he had to become in order to survive. In many ways, Sugimoto views Asirpa as his opportunity to save himself by making sure she never becomes like him. It's like he's traveling back in time and guiding himself off the path he walked. This is why he gets so frustrated by people like Vilk and Kiradanke and Hijikata that just want to push Asirpa down the path that cursed them all.
I don't love this scene, though. To me, it treads a little bit too close to telling the audience instead of showing us. It's odd for Sugimoto, who's normally wary of strangers, to dump his inner feelings on this dude he just met. Everything that Sugimoto tells Vaisili can already be intuited by his actions. It's unnecessary for him to explain it here. It removes some of the subtlety from the story, and I don't think there's good reason for it. On their way south, the group delivers the letter to the lighthouse keepers and make a short stop in Toyohara, where Asirpa and Sugimoto hunt a wolverine together. It's their first hunt together since they are separated, but Asirpa's mind seems to be elsewhere. Her trip through Karafuto has had a profound effect on her. She now understands the fear Kiradanke felt for the indigenous people and their culture. Asirpa is lost in thought, wondering how they can preserve and pass on the Ainu traditions to the next generation in perpetuity. During their hunt, they run into two strange men with a funny little box. Photography cameras were first invented in the early 19th century, and it wasn't long after their invention that humanity began pursuing a way to take many pictures at once in a sequence in order to capture and recreate movement. One of the first bits of film ever created, the horse in motion, was actually created by a series of cameras all taking pictures one after the other. In 1895, the Lumiere brothers invented the cinematograph in France, which utilized their patented perforated film to capture and then project a series of images, creating films. And now, more than 100 years later, that wonderful invention is being used to make a video about Tanagaki's breasts. What a wonderful world we live in. The Lumiere brothers sent François Constant Giroel, I might be pronouncing that wrong, but it's okay since French is a gutter language, to Japan in 1897, where he filmed a number of things, including the Ainu. One of the men that Asirpa meets is named Giroel, and he seems to be based on François Constant Giroel. After showing them how the cinematograph works, Asirpa sees a golden opportunity to pass down Ainu traditions by filming some Ainu stories. She believes that in doing so, their stories can be passed on regardless of language or cultural barriers. Everyone works together to film several stories with Asirpa taking on a director's role, though she worries that it isn't good enough and that it won't preserve their culture well enough. Sugimoto can tell she's really torturing herself over doing this right. As a man that takes months to make a single video, I don't get the big deal. The group sits down to watch the results of their work, and while not perfect, they clearly enjoyed the experience. Finally, Giroel shows them one more film, one that he filmed many years earlier during his first trip to Japan. The film he shows them depicts Vilk, while Asirpa was still a baby. And perhaps more surprisingly, it shows Asirpa's mother, who passed away before Asirpa can remember. In this short film, you can see how Asirpa took after her mother in their appreciation of food, their facial expressions, their love of the Ainu. Unfortunately, as the film comes to an end, a fire sparks up as these cinematographs were prone to experiencing, and Asirpa watches as the only record of her mother's face burns up before her eyes. Asirpa realizes that things like films, books, and photos are powerful tools to record history, but they are ultimately fragile and temporary. They won't last forever, and they can't preserve the Ainu way of life. She reflects that the stories she heard from her father about her mother were stronger and more memorable than the film she saw today. If she wants the Ainu and their beliefs to pass from one generation to the next, then the Ainu have to persist and pass it down themselves. Yet their existence is endangered by a world that seems hell-bent on eliminating them and their way of life. Asirpa wonders if Kidodanke and Vilk were right. Maybe the only way to save the Ainu is to fight. Sugimoto responds that even if that's the case, it doesn't have to be her that fights. But Asirpa doesn't accept this. She feels responsible for the Ainu and their fate after Kidodanke passed his mission on to her. Sugimoto again says that it doesn't have to be her that fights, and Asirpa confronts him, asking if he's trying to save himself by stopping her from fighting. Sugimoto takes a moment to reflect and admits that she's right about that, but it's more than that too. Sugimoto admits that he didn't tell Asirpa what Vilk said before he died. He tells her about how Vilk raised her to fight in the mountains and to lead the Ainu. Sugimoto tells her that he can't forgive Vilk for that, or Kidodanke for passing their battle onto her. He feels like they put a curse on her to compel her to fight without considering what she wants. Sugimoto asks Asirpa what she wants to do. He reminds her that she once told him that those that kill go to hell, and he theorizes that the person that came up with that idea must have been someone like him. Someone that killed so many people that they could no longer see a happy ending for themselves. Someone that lost who they were and saw no way back. Sugimoto tells Asirpa that he doesn't want that to happen to her, and tells her what he's been keeping inside this whole time. He tells her to give up on the gold, and leave all this fighting to everyone else. Sugimoto is a total fucking hypocrite. He doesn't mean to be, but he is. This is another one of those moments where Sugimoto's kindness turns into a flaw. Sugimoto is aggravated by all these people trying to push Asirpa down the path of violence. He's pissed that Vilk raised Asirpa to fight, pissed that Kidodanke pushed his mission onto her, pissed that Hijikata wants to fulfill Vilk's vision, but Sugimoto is doing the exact same thing. It might be a different path he's pushing her down, but he's still trying to decide for her in his own way. If he really wanted Asirpa to decide for herself what to do, He would have told her what Vilk said from the start. Instead, he kept it from her in the hopes that she would decide to tell Tsurumi the key to the code and stay out of the fight for it. Like he did when he abandoned Asirpa at the Kotan and went off on his own, Sugimoto didn't respect Asirpa's right to choose. He may tell her that he wants her to decide for herself, but he only really wants that if she decides not to fight. He has the best intentions, but he isn't being fair to her. Asirpa is standing at a massive fork in the road, and what direction she chooses to go down will have a profound effect on the person she becomes. The problem is, she's uncertain about who she wants to be. Does she want to be the pacifist that pushes the decisions onto someone else so that their own hands remain clean, or will she lead the Ainu and lead the fight for their freedom? Who is she? What is her identity? Asirpa doesn't know. She's torn between what others want from her. She knows she has to choose, but she's struggling with what she believes is right. After traveling through Karafuto with Kirodanke, she does feel responsible for the fate of the Ainu, yet she still doesn't want to kill. She doesn't want to fight. She's trying to find a way to protect the Ainu without fighting, but she's not finding a way. Everyone is tugging her in different directions, trying to decide her identity for her.
The group continues their journey south and they drop off the Karafuto Ainu in their Kotan before hitching a ride to the coast. Tanigaki shares a tearful farewell to Chikapasi, who has decided to stay in Karafuto, where he has found a home for himself. Finally, they arrive in Oromari, where they wait for Tsurumi to come meet them. It's here that Asirpa will meet Tsurumi for the first time and decide if he's someone worthy of entrusting the gold to. Someone who is surprisingly not so enthusiastic to see Tsurumi is Koito, who's a bit lost in thought.
Koito reveals to Tsukishima that after Ogata called him Barchonok, he told Koito that he should ask Tsurumi about Mantatsu. Mantatsu is the name of the South Manchuria Railway Company, which was established after the Russo-Japanese War to manage the railroads and establish settlements in Manchuria. Japan gained the rights to operate the railways in the area after the war ended, which gave them a strong foothold in the region. Only not everyone in the government supported this plan, including Ogata's father. Koito remembers something that Tsurumi once said, that as long as Manchuria is part of Japan, their fallen comrades would rest on Japanese soil. If Ogata's father blocked the plan, Manchuria would become China completely once again, and would become Chinese soil. Koito is beginning to unravel the conspiracy. Tsurumi coerced Ogata into killing his father to eliminate his opposition to the plan. Koito believes that Ogata betrayed them after realizing he'd been used, and after hearing Ogata call him Barchonok, Koito believes that both Ogata and Tsukishima were the ones that kidnapped him as a kid. He realizes that if Tsurumi manufactured a scenario where he could save Koito's life, then Koito's father and his naval fleet would be indebted to Tsurumi and at his disposal. And if that's the case, it worked. After all, it was Daddy Koito's battleships that allowed Tsurumi to storm Awashiri. Koito has seen through it all. He knows the truth now. He knows he was used. Realizing it's no use hiding the truth anymore, Tsukishima asks Koito one question. Stunned, Koito asks what Tsukishima means. Tsukishima reveals to Koito how Tsurumi once used an elaborate ruse to recruit him as well. He explains how Tsurumi lied and lied and lied again to make Tsukishima feel like he was needed, so that Tsukishima would become Tsurumi's loyal soldier, someone that would do his dirty work without question. But Tsukishima doesn't mind, because even if it was for his own selfish reasons, Tsurumi did save him. Tsurumi did give him a reason to keep going. Now, Tsukishima can help Tsurumi to ensure Manchuria remains part of Japan, and their comrades can rest on Japanese soil. Koito asks if that's really all Tsurumi wants to do, and Tsukishima admits that he doesn't know. But he also doesn't care. He admits that Tsurumi whispers sweet lies to them to offer them some form of salvation, and that he's willing to accept that salvation, even though he realizes that Tsurumi only offers that salvation as long as it aids his goals. He figures that as long as Tsurumi's lies and deceit save people along the way, then it's all justified. Because Tsurumi is going to achieve great things, and Tsukishima intends to stay with him until the end of the line. He tells Koito to think about this, because if he challenges Tsurumi, then Tsurumi will have Koito taken out too, and Tsukishima will be the one to do it. Koito is stunned for a moment, and then, horny? He's elated that Tsurumi plotted that whole elaborate conspiracy just for him, and he's even more impressed with Tsurumi than he was before, which is definitely a reaction. I think it's important for us to take a minute to go over what we know about Tsurumi and his plans because, as I've said before, I don't think it's very obvious what he wants. We know what his goal is. He wants the gold so he can establish an independent military state and rebel against the government, but why does he want this? As far as he's shown his soldiers, Tsurumi wants to make sure Manchuria continues to be part of the Japanese Empire, yet he's also trying to overthrow that same empire. It seems to me that despite their recent victories in the Russo-Japanese War and the Sino-Japanese War, Tsurumi doesn't believe the government is going far enough. He mentioned at one point that Russia has not paid reparations for the war, so it seems to me he believes the government should make them pay. He says that they were left with a bunch of barren, worthless land. I believe this is referring to Manchuria and the half of Karafuto that Japan took over at the end of the war. They went to war so they could annex Korea, but the government hasn't actually done that yet. At this point in history, Korea was only a protectorate of Japan. Tsurumi has a vision for Japan, a vision that he doesn't see coming true as things stand. Tsurumi sees a Japan that not only rules over Hokkaido, Honshu, Kyushu, and Shikoku, but also Korea, Manchuria, the Kuril Islands, and Karafuto in its entirety. Korea isn't an annex or protectorate in Tsurumi's vision, Korea is Japan. Manchuria isn't Chinese land that Japan operates settlements and railways on, Manchuria is Japan. Tsurumi sees the Empire of Japan as having the capability to stretch much farther and wider than it does now, and he intends to create an independent nation that can accomplish just that. Still, what motivates that goal? Who's he doing it for? For his soldiers? If that were the case, he wouldn't have to lie to get them on his side. And where do the Ainu fit into his plans?
In another part of town, Sugimoto is lost in thought over all this gold business and Ashirapa's involvement when a drunk Shiraishi wanders by and starts hassling him. In his drunken stupor, Shiraishi confronts Sugimoto over how he's handling this whole situation. He challenges Sugimoto for giving up on the gold hunt and leaving it to Tsurumi, and Sugimoto responds that he believes this is what's best for Ashirapa. Sugimoto asks why he's only thinking about Ashirapa. What about Ume and her eye surgery? What about Shiraishi? What does he get from this deal with Tsurumi? Asirpa didn't challenge Sugimoto for trying to control the path that she goes down, but Shiraishi does. He accuses Sugimoto of going soft and tells him that Asirpa has grown while in Karafuto. Sugimoto just hasn't seen or accepted it. If Sugimoto is truly Asirpa's partner, her equal, then he should support Asirpa if she chooses to fight. Shiraishi asks a question that Sugimoto hasn't considered. Does Tsurumi really care about what happens to the Ainu? Then he takes a nap, leaving Sugimoto to sit and think about it. Once again, I want to point out the subtle but important role Shiraishi plays in this story. He may not be as close to Asirpa as Sugimoto, but he's still part of the idiot trio, and he wants what's best for her too. He doesn't think that what Sugimoto is doing is right for her, and he isn't afraid to confront Sugimoto on this. And Sugimoto really needs that right now, because Sugimoto is scared. All these years, the thing that made Sugimoto immortal is his fearlessness, his lack of hesitation, his willingness to do what needs to be done to survive. Yet ever since Abashiri, Sugimoto has become defensive, worried, and safe. Not for his own sake, of course, but because he wants to protect Asirpa. He isn't respecting her decisions, and he doesn't have faith in her to take care of herself. Is that really how he should treat his partner? Can they even be called partners like that? Partners support each other, and Sugimoto isn't really supporting Asirpa right now.
In the morning, Tsurumi and his men arrive. Seeing Asirpa for the first time, Tsurumi recalls checking the color of Nopetabo's eyes. Then he remembers Vilk's eyes. Tsurumi's wound begins to ooze. Immediately, Tsurumi tells his men to load Asirpa onto a ship like she's not even there. Asirpa accuses Tsurumi of trying to separate her from Sugimoto and keep her captive, but Tsurumi assures her that they will see each other again. Asirpa asks what Tsurumi intends to do with the gold. What will happen to the Ainu in his vision of the future? Tsurumi gives the rather shallow response that he wants everyone to be happy. Asirpa tells Tsurumi that she won't help him unless he uses the gold for the Ainu. It belongs to them anyway. Tsurumi remembers Vilk again and responds that the Ainu want to use the gold to slaughter the Japanese as his wound leaks uncontrollably.
Asirpa rejects this assertion, exclaiming that not all Ainu want to go to war. They deserve the right to choose what to do with the gold. Tsurumi coldly responds that the surviving Ainu have inherited the wishes of the dead. Tsurumi's men are surprised by his behavior. Even Tsukishima is struck by how blunt Tsurumi is being. Tsurumi mentions that Asirpa's eyes look just like her father's as he remembers retrieving a bullet from his deceased child's body. He chuckles, and the brain Gatorade flows freely like never before. His own men, the people closest to him and most used to his eccentricities, are taken aback by this reaction as Tsurumi giggles like a schoolgirl. So close to his goal, Tsurumi is struggling to keep it together, to keep his true intentions held in. There are no sweet lies here. They're seeing a glimpse of the real Tsurumi. A Tsurumi whose plans are more devious than they can imagine. A Tsurumi with a grudge to bear. Asirpa has seen all she needs to see. Asirpa looks at Sugimoto and tells him that she'll decide her own fate. Only we can decide what our identity will be, and she's taking it into her own hands. Sugimoto grimaces. This isn't what he wants for her, but he realized Shiraishi was right. He accepts it and supports her decision. The soldiers take cover while Sugimoto and Asirpa make a run for it. They're gonna find the gold by themselves and they won't allow anyone to abuse it. Finally, they're back together properly. And even though they've got no skins and no support, they're stronger for it. Tsurumi and his men chase after them. Tsukishima finds them, and even though they travel together for so long, he doesn't hesitate to shoot Sugimoto. More men catch up and they shoot Sugimoto over and over until Asirpa steps in. They cease fire so they won't hurt her. Koito moves in to apprehend her, but they made a mistake trying to capture her. Sugimoto isn't conflicted anymore. He's dedicated entirely to supporting her. So even though they travel together for so long, Immortal Sugimoto gets up and stabs Koito with no hesitation. He goes on a rampage, attacking all of Tsurumi's men like a wild beast before running off again. Tsukishima stops to tend to Koito's injury, but Tsurumi walks right past them, barely sparing a passing glance. Injured and bleeding, Asirpa leads Sugimoto to safety, when Vaishili appears and offers them a ride. Shiraishi and Tanigaki catch up, but they tell Tanigaki to stay behind. Tsurumi has Inkarma. If Tanigaki goes with them, Tsurumi will use her against them. Asirpa asks Tanigaki to go back to Huchi and let her know that she'll come to see her as soon as she can, as they leave him behind. It's down to just the idiot trio once again. Plus Vaishili. They escape to a waiting ferry. One of Tsurumi's men notices them, so Vaishili takes him out to cover their tracks. The ferry sets off, and Tsurumi follows on one of Daddy Koito's ships, but they manage to lose him in the ice. Tsurumi looks on, disappointed, as the little Gatorade leaks out. He failed today. As they cross the ice, Sugimoto and Asirpa talk about everything. Asirpa tells Sugimoto that she knows how to solve the code, and Sugimoto asks what the key is, but quickly retracts the question. He tells her that it's her choice to tell him when she's ready, which is a display of his renewed trust in her. Asirpa thinks to herself that if she tells Sugimoto the key, he may run off to find the gold by himself to keep her safe. He would run himself into danger over and over until he died for her sake, and she doesn't want that. She thinks back on their fight with Tsurumi's men and realizes that she can be his shield and protect him from them. She can keep him safe while they dive headlong into this struggle. And if she has good reason, she's ready to dive into hell with him as well. The roles have been reversed, in a sense. Sugimoto wanted to save Asirpa, but now Asirpa is determined to save Sugimoto. She won't let him give up his life for the gold, or for her. She cares about him and wants to support him the way that he has supported her. Back on land, Tsukishima finds the soldier that Vaishili shot, yet strangely, his uniform and equipment have been stripped off. Someone must have needed them.
Thank you for watching part 2. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like if you did, and maybe leave a comment letting me know what you thought. I'd really appreciate that. I want to once again give a huge shout out to a couple of very talented musicians who worked with me to create custom tracks for this video, including the song that plays when Ogata confronts Asirpa, and the song that plays in the ending kind of chase sequence, as well as a couple others. They're just incredibly talented, super easy to work with, and went hands-on with me to, you know, just make the perfect music for what I was trying to do, and I really appreciated that. So they're called Beyond the Hatal Abyss. There'll be a link to their website in the description where you can commission custom music for them if you so choose. I would recommend it. Again, they're extremely easy to work with. You're probably wondering about part 3, huh? Well, you can watch it right now on Patreon. Patreon subscribers get early access to new videos alongside weekly progress updates, written reviews, Patreon streams, behind the scenes content, and even the occasional exclusive video, including extended cuts of the cooking segments from this video. All that for just $5 a month. It's a great deal, really. I want to give a massive shout out to all my Patreon subscribers, all of whom make it much easier to do what I do, and especially my gamers, Raze, Grant Harsh, and Kiana, and all of my simps, Bill Nye the Bounty Guy, Marzak the Mad, Jimmy B, Belgara, David D, Ramu Nerd, Skippy, Degenerate, Sammy, Bork Laser, Ryan Hosford, Matsugen, and Doug Dimmadome himself. Thank you all so much. For the rest of you, part 3 will be out in 1 month, so I'll see you then, and I appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.